everyone, and welcome back to the Brightworks. Been a minute since we've done a live cast, and boy, I'm sure glad to be back in the saddle. Be sure, by the way, if you haven't checked it out already, to go check out the We Are Back Baby video, because there's some really fun announcements there, and you're going to be thrilled to go see them, I'm sure. Today, we are going to be taking a look at a viewer-submitted game, and we're going to be taking a look specifically at Mythan. Mythan submitted this game asking for a humble critique on how to better play when your teammates are, let's say, underskilled or less familiar with the game. We'll try to put this nicely here. Mythan playing in a game where there's some lower skill opponents here, or some lower skill teammates, I should say, and wants to know what they could have done better in order to achieve victory, and how to better work with teammates that don't maybe perhaps know the 100% optimal do this, then that, then this sort of build orders, which is absolutely a-okay. Mythan let me know that they share my sentiment towards always trying to teach new players, don't degrade them, try and give them a little creative space, let them do their own thing, and I think that is absolutely the right idea here. So while we take a look at Mythan's build, we can take a look around the map and meet some of our other players. Our blue team leader is going to be Ender SCFA, a player we've seen around quite a few times. Very, very good to see. Going for a bot lab in a rear position here. Typically on All That Glitters version 2.0, the one that we are currently looking at, 2.1, sorry. There's usually 3 techers, and it's these 3 back here in these positions. Typically the person in this position, this is all mirrored of course across the map, but typically the person in this position can't really afford to tech because this lane is at a disadvantage, and so they need to get vehicles or some sort of units out on the field basically as soon as possible. Now, taking the Get a Unit Out and About on the Field award, we have our red team leader, Unicorn Cats, going for a bot lab as the Armada faction, getting some of those very annoying ticks out on the field, manages to get all 3 of them into the back line here. Let's see if they can do any damage. Now there is a laser turret here guarding some of these metal extractors, but I think there might be an opening. Although these ticks do eventually get caught by pawns. Ooh, but the pawns don't manage to kill that one. There's a few moving through. That tick is probably doomed over on the right-hand side, but there is one more tick that managed to sneak into the back lane here. Let's see if it can get any sort of economic damage done. It doesn't look like it will be able to harass Ender SCFA, who does have the pawns out on the field, but it will be heading over towards Kaislik 540's base to try and get a little bit of damage done. It starts harassing down these constructors, doing a little bit of damage to them, but I'd love to see it go after these metal extractors. I think that would probably be far more valuable. Anyways, the player we're looking at today is Mythan, and one of the things that I would say is if you're playing with newer players, be very delicate about the way that you suggest strategies, because you might be right. You might have a suggestion for a way that they should be playing, but it is the reality of multiplayer games that if you don't phrase your suggestions quite right, or you're just a little too aggressive with it, they're not going to listen to you, and that's just one of the facts of life. Now, Mythan here has done a great job of pushing forward with the commander, but I would actually love to see pushed forward a little bit more to deny this high-value metal extractor spot right here. We do have the laser turrets covering our own, but it would be even better to deny the enemy Unicorn Cats their metal extractors. So that's always something to keep in mind. I can understand why we're building in this choke point, though. It's to make sure that no units can sneak through anymore. And it will be working for now, as we do catch one of these rascals that was trying to push its way through. Another one has gone by, but it gets shot down by MC's commander very rapidly. Lovely to see that. Techno, Spliff, and Stop are in a little bit of a battle here. Stop doing an excellent job of positioning himself. That's a little tip for the new commander update. You can no longer D-gun another commander. So what you have to do if you want to protect your frontline defenses is stand in front of them with your commander, and it can build backwards. The commander can build backwards, but the enemy commanders can no longer shoot forwards at your commander here. So very, very nicely done by Stop. Whoa. Alright, gonna have to fix that. Yeah, okay, apparently the glue that was holding my my poster up on the wall has decayed while I was away on vacation. Anyway, we were talking about stop here, and doing a phenomenal job pushing forward with these light laser turrets, using the commander to body block so that they cannot be de-gunned down, meaning that they're actually going to be able to hold on to this valuable metal extractor here. You can see there's another one back here as well, but certainly holding on to both of these is a huge advantage and is going to let stop continue to push on that side. Now Mython is working with Bar here, both about the same true skill here, 20 and 21, although their chevrons are equal as well. Chevrons more or less represent how much time you've put into the game, whereas the true skill is just your like a ranking system. So you can have people with really high true skill but very low chevrons, and that usually means that they haven't played the game very long and they just got put into a artificially high position. Or you can have it the other way around. You can have somebody with tons of chevrons and a very low true skill, and that means they might have been throwing some games, or you know, they're maybe not the best. But either way, as far as critiques here, I don't see anything specifically I can let you know about Mython. Your build specifically looks all right. It looks like we are basically stalling on energy here, so just more and more windmills would probably be the move. We do have these constructor bots out here, and it looks like they're thinking about it. Yeah, we had an advanced solar panel coming up here. Okay, yeah, so I like to see this. So we're going for more windmills, and we're going for a constructor turret. Just one constructor turret can build just enough build power to help build all this just a hair quicker than you would normally see it. And I think this is definitely the right move. But we are going to need quite a bit more power before we actually go into our first advanced solar panel. You want about 300. 2 to 300 is going to be a very solid amount of energy. You're going to stall your lab if you have any less than that. And you probably will stall your lab regardless, but yeah, anywhere around that, you're going to be in good luck. So it looks like about at max power, we're going to be within that ballpark, so we are looking good there. Meanwhile, we're keeping eyes over here, and this is another thing that I think a lot of people fail to look at, is you definitely want to make sure that you're keeping your eyes all over the map as a player here. Keeping tabs on what is vulnerable and what isn't vulnerable, and where you can attack, where you can apply pressure, and maybe you can apply pressure to help your teammate out. Always very, very important to look at. We can see that blitzes are sneaking through, and that's a good idea. That is pulling a couple of these tanks away from the front line of the yellow player here, which is quite good. Meanwhile, Unicorn Cats has set up their own front line, and that's a lot of light laser turrets. Definitely daunting to push into. We do have a heavy laser turret coming up. A interesting addition to the front line here, but we are starting to stall on metal. So typically when you see a metal stall, it basically just means that you need to scale energy as quickly as possible. So one thing you can do is you can turn this onto high priority, and that'll send all of your available resources into building this solar panel. But what I would also suggest is just building a whole bunch of windmills. Sort of what Walker 2.0 is doing. Just build a massive wind farm on some segment of the map, and you're going to be in a good spot. It's a great way to passively build up your wind production without actually cutting into your energy production too badly. You can see now we have the energy to actually produce units here. As we're actually overflowing a little bit. This is probably coming in from teammates here that are overflowing, because you see we're spending over 500, 600, almost up to 800 here and there, but we're only incoming about 400, give or take. Now, there is a tank that is pushed through over here. This is quite annoying for MC, who is now having to deal with this. It's been very difficult for him to deal with this tank, apparently, as it has now gotten up to two chevrons and is laying down quite a lot of fire over here. It's torn through all these metal extractors, costing my thing quite a lot. That is actually something I just realized. Sorry, there's commanders going down here. Oh, that was a sacrifice. That commander was blown up for its metal. But this is something I noticed, is you can definitely work on building more metal extractors here. We do have the vehicle going out, so that's quite nice. Yeah, the quicker you get those metal extractors up and running, the better. You can see that the opponent here, Unicorn Cats, has already claimed all of these metal extractors on their side of the map, meaning that their economy has been scaling slightly quicker than yours has, and that can lead to exponential gains very, very soon. Vehicles are very common on this map because it's so wide open. Things like blitz cheeses tend to work pretty good because there's just so much volume, so much space that you can maneuver them around in, and they can really take advantage of that very, very quick movement speed coupled with their extremely high damage per second. We have amphibious tanks out on the field. That's quite interesting. Deather is maybe not entirely sure about the proper unit to go for here. We have a mixture of shell shockers and amphibious tanks coming out. So one thing you can do is, if you're in this kind of lobby, Deather is clearly very new to the game, and there's nothing wrong with that, but what you could suggest is to tell them to hand out combat engineers, because what that tells them immediately is how valuable those combat engineers are, and that you would like one, and that's a pretty good way to work with those teammates, and even ones that aren't working optimally, you know, they're not spreadsheet calculators of perfect efficiency, they're still going to be able to contribute greatly to the team. I can see that Deather has gone for that T2 transition up here. Fortunately, Stop was able to hold this line, although they are eventually going to be overrun as the tech lead happens, because Tech 2 will be coming out from the back line here, and then the metal extractors will get upgraded, and eventually there's more metal extractors here than there are here for Stop, up in the northern corner for Techno Spliff. Meaning that eventually Stop will be overrun if we don't see a contribution here from Deather. And indeed, it doesn't look like we are. It looks like mostly we're teching in the backline here, so I'm expecting to see a little bit of folly back there. Meanwhile, T2 Constructor is out back here. We do not have a lab in the backline for Drago Ken, but this lane has not been harassed super tremendously. We've been able to keep this metal extractor up and running, so that's very nice to see. And certainly that's another area to improve on, is just continually sending raiding parties. That's something that a lot of people really neglect. It's something that I neglect. It's very difficult to manage that, as well as your armies and your economy and all that stuff. But sending raiding parties is super important, because it keeps your enemies spread very thinly. On these maps, if you can pull multiple armies to one spot, you could pull all of the red armies to a single position. What that's going to mean is that eventually, when you need to attack a different area, those armies are going to be out of position, and you have a tremendous advantage. Now, we do have a gauntlet that was thrown up on the front line. I'm always skeptical of gauntlets, because yeah, they can easily be worth way more metal than the amount of value and damage that they can do. That felt like a confusing sentence. Let me put that a different way. You spend 1,250 metal on a gauntlet. However, if you can only ever get value out of it by taking down frontline defenses like light laser turrets, or maybe a couple of ticks or pawns or something like that, you're never really going to be able to you're never really going to be able to get the value that you need out of that much metal. Whereas otherwise, it could have been in units, it could have been in resbots, it could have been in tech, any of those. It could have been elsewhere, and it could have been way more valuable. So things like this, where you have the medium plasma artillery and a choke point like this is not terrible, because it does allow you to contribute damage to this front line without having to risk your own units, which is powerful. But certainly, again, the same thing, like you're always going to be at the risk of losing your own units, or rather using up all your metal to do a little bit of damage to the enemy's units. A little bit under-aggressive here. I'd love to see a little bit more posturing. I would love to see units pushing in on these turrets here and making sure that Unicorn Cats does not feel comfortable teching up in the back line like they are. They're going up for a fusion reactor, which is a little bit greedy for 12 minutes, but certainly they have no pressure applied on them right now, so they can afford to do so. But I mean, look at this. This is basically a couple of Rocketeers, a bunch of pawns, and some light laser turrets. This really doesn't hold up very well against too many of these medium tanks, and I think we're almost to that number where this could start to easily push through there. Now, Commander has gone down over here by MC, and immediately that puts Mythan in a really difficult position, because now they have to contest this Commander wreckage because it's so valuable. Meanwhile, MC is down from the down on build power on the front lines. MC also never rebuilt these metal extractors back here, or they have just continually been harassed. Either way, they're currently down, meaning that the economy for MC is struggling. We do have these T2 extractors coming up, which is quite nice, but we don't have the metal we don't have the metal right now in order to finish these construction. I would love to see these T1 solar panels taken down. You don't really need those once you have your advanced solar panels up. But more and more of these tanks keep pouring through, and Mythan is suddenly about to be spread completely thin, now having to cover two fronts at once because there are no units out here for MC. Well, there's a couple of tanks, but it's certainly not going to be enough. These tanks have become a joint problem here. You can see that the trail they carved was right along, whoops, not that button, right along this path, meaning that they went right in front of 2 players, but technically they went in front of 4 because there are these backline players as well, who should probably be trying to help with that. We do see some shurikens brought out to paralyze them. That's quite nice. Ideally, we could have paralyzed them up here, but there's probably a lot going on in the mind of Ender SCFA here as they're teching up in the backline, trying to make the very best use out of their economy as they can, since they've been given the opportunity to tech up rapidly. More and more of these brutes are pushing forward, though, and the thing is, you can kill them efficiently with just 2 or 3 of them, but you're not going to kill them very quickly, right? So you're not going to take a tremendous amount of damage on your units, but you aren't going to prevent this unit from pushing forward very quickly. So eventually the brute does go down, but if there's any more than that, if they send 2 or 3 or 4 of those brutes, they're going to be able to do quite a tremendous amount of damage. Now we can see why that T1 defense is so inefficient. As soon as these T2 artillery units come out, they're just completely devastating to the front lines here. This is really nice. We are sending some blitzes forward. I did catch this. Sending some blitzes past to ravage the economies back here, and you can see that they actually hit a really good timing attack here, where it looks like Alex X is starting to tech up and doesn't really have the build power to throw up too many defenses right now. Will get a twin guard up before the blitzes manage to storm the base, but if these blitzes are microed properly, they certainly should be able to beat that. It looks like they're going to try and get into the backline here and do a bunch of damage to the economy, which is not a terrible idea. Certainly they could kill this advanced fusion reactor, and that would be really devastating, but we are producing as many of these grunts as we possibly can here, and I think eventually we will be able to blast down the blitzes. Not before they do some damage, though. They do kill one of the energy converter clumps. They kill a second energy converter. That takes out the build power, meaning that these bots are not going to push forward nearly as quickly here. Oh. If we had killed this last build power, I think that would have been worth it, but right now the advanced fusion reactor is still up and running. Big bombing run up north here, by the way, taking out the air players and air labs. Meanwhile, Mythan's front line has completely collapsed here. The units were dealing with a push over here, and that left the rest of them out of place. Now there's a bunch of these brutes moving forward, meaning that these stouts have to retreat off from there and come cover this front line. We really need to see these artillery being used to tear down this line here over on the left side in this choke point with the yellow player, but I doubt we have vision. Yeah, we don't have vision over there. We know that there were jammers or something, but we don't know the extent of the damage, or the extent of the defenses, I should say. Vanishers are out now. Those are a very good option. They're sort of the Cortex vehicle equivalent to the Starlight. One big burst of damage here. Not exactly the same. They definitely have their differences, but just similar. Similar damage profiles, that's for sure. And you can see they wipe away those T1 vehicles relatively easily. We now even have some shuriken brought to the front line here to paralyze gunslingers and, well, basically anything they can. They find a bunch of hounds here. Hounds and snipers. This is a great opportunity to jump on top of this army. This army's power is basically cut in half as these units are paralyzed here. And indeed, the medium tanks will roll forward, so very, very nicely done. The aircraft will eventually clean up the shuriken, but not before they do a decent amount to help out this army. Keep rolling forward with those tanks. You definitely don't want to stop, and you definitely don't want to clump them up. Remember that those hounds have a nasty AoE on them, and if you clump up the tanks, they're just going to get even more efficient with every shot. Some constructors were lost on the front line, which isn't perfectly efficient, but also there's lots to micromanage here, so can't blame them. Meanwhile, on this front line for Mythan, looks like the tanks have been rebuilt by Alex X. Looks like the economy is slowly getting put back together here. Build power is being reinstated, and with a single advanced fusion reactor, we're actually dumping tons of energy into our team's economy, but the team is eager to use it up. You can see everyone is spending their energy as quickly as possible. At the very least, Unicorn Cats is depleting that energy as quickly as they can into as many sniper bots as possible, which is absolutely phenomenal. Sniper bots are very energy dense, 20,000 energy per sniper bot. So if you happen to have a tremendous excess of energy, it's definitely a great option. The Sumo has been pumped out, the can, as it was called. And it's another decent option. It's like a very efficient way of dealing with these tanks, but again, it's not very slow. So the tanks don't really do much damage against it, but it doesn't really do too much damage against these tanks either. So it's going to take a good long while before just one of these can mop up this front line here. The tanks move over, and that's going to be a much better play. Meanwhile, on the eastern side, Stop has built a great wall here. A great stop, if you will. And they are going to be teching up to T2. Now, interestingly, we aren't eating up our T1 solar panels or our T1 lab. We are just going to be paying for the T2 out of pocket. Ooh, a single sprinter is broken in the back line, showing exactly why raiding is so dangerous here. You can see just this one guy manages to get back here, find some windmills, and cause a massive chain reaction. It's not a huge hit, and certainly the Bull was able to clean it up eventually, but that is just one less energy farm that is going to be helping Stop over here on the right side. I'm a little bit worried about how much damage has been done. Now, meanwhile, there was a big push over here, some sort of push that I missed. I see wreckages of banishers and stuff from the purple player, so I must have missed that. Tore apart this front line, but it was eventually cleaned up by the red player, who's now representing the entire front of the red team. Although I suppose Alex X is doing a good job as well holding this line. This is a very difficult area to pork up in defense, but definitely they're holding their own here. Resbots is definitely the name of the game. We should probably see some combat engineers since we are on T2 by now. We do have loads and loads of these solar panels up, and I think it's about time we start up a fusion reactor. That's gonna help. That's gonna help pay for the energy here, but also, ooh, all of our build power is actually paused for some reason. I'm not sure what went wrong there, but the build power was all messed up. Something went terribly wrong and stopped the construction turrets from working right there, which is a bit unfortunate. Yeah, these wind turbines should be going up tremendously fast. We do have a T2 constructor. Oh, it was an air constructor. That must have been gifted to us. So no, we don't have a T2 constructor. We should probably see one of those pretty soon. We also probably want a... yeah, I'm thinking a fusion reactor and maybe a little bit more build power as well. Maybe go up to 6, maybe 8 of these construction turrets. There we go. Yep, we start those up right away. Very nicely done. Meanwhile, sprinters have started to ravage the back lines here. And they're causing mayhem in the back for stop. Meanwhile, some mammoths have been tasked with pushing forward here. And they're going to start blasting down these T1 walls. I think they're actually aiming at these thugs over here, but the walls just happen to be in the way. Take down a jammer. All very, very good. Fiends will blow up these walls pretty quickly. Those T1 walls don't hold up very much against T2 units. And the Mammoth is as T2 as it gets. Absolutely beast of a tank out there. Meanwhile, there's tremendous amounts of metal laying all over the field here. You can see 6,500 metal just decaying on the field over here, and it definitely needs to be eaten up. This is quite nice. We do have a couple of butlers working on it. The butlers have quite a good amount of build power, actually. I think it's 200 build power? No, 140 build power. Still quite nice for such a small bot, such a minor investment. 210 metal and 3,000 energy. That's a tremendous amount of build power, and they can be really, really useful on the front lines. You can see they eat up this metal super quickly and feed it right back to your army, which is very, very nice. The T2 air constructor does eventually go down here, as it was just a little bit too close to some anti-air, and eventually it got shot down. Massive T1 medium tank push here as we try to break the front line. Oh, we actually decided not to commit here. I think that's a mistake. I think these tanks should have been spread out, and we should have got a beautiful little concave here, and we turn that off and draw the little concave. If we had applied pressure evenly from all sides here, that would have absolutely been a win condition here for MC on their line, but unfortunately that was not the engagement they were probably hoping for. Now, luckily, with the help of teammates, eventually this area will be broken, or at the very least, the agitators will go down. But the medium tanks still have to go through all those wreckages of their, well, once living brethren. They have to drive past the corpses of their tanks past, and you know, as demoralizing as that is, it also means that these tanks are going to really struggle getting through here. Eventually, these defenses are broken, but the commander is here now to blow apart many of those tanks. A lot of them go down, but there's still a substantial tank army. We could still definitely push in here. I think the lack of courage is probably the biggest killer here. Ooh, a bunch of these Quakers actually get jumped on top of by some sprinters here. Yeah, this is really unfortunate. Luckily, the Shuriken are here to paralyze this and save the day, but certainly these Quaker were in a whole lot of trouble there. Meanwhile, light gunship were brought out. A bit late for light gunship to still be considered effective. Whoa, nuclear bomber is out. Didn't see that one. It does drop a bomb on something. I didn't see exactly what was over there. It looks like a bunch of wind turbines. Bit of an odd target, but it does go down eventually. Meanwhile, fighters are, well, trying to survive in the back line. They don't have much hope. Yeah, they all start to go down pretty quickly. The Junos are raining now. The Junos are a very interesting device. They're very good for making sure that the enemy can't put up any radars or any radar jammers, for that matter. Very, very important to build one or two of those if nobody else on your team will, or you know, if you want to help your team out. Build those pinpointers too. Those are also very, very handy. It doesn't feel like it on an individual basis, but over the course of a game, every single shot being, you know, an extra 33% more accurate, give or take, is definitely worth it. The Starlight here is in a quite nice position. I think we could move it a little bit closer. Yeah, if we could move it within range of this choke point, it would be quite nice to just continuously burst down anything that came inside there. We do have a bunch of tanks continuing to push forward, and the bulls are out as well. Yep, those bulls, man, they're devastating. They roll right over those wreckages. They certainly do not care. as they continue to push forward here. We need to see some aggression. This aggression basically has to yield a kill on this base, otherwise we're going to be outscaled pretty quickly. We can see that the pink player, yep, okay, there we go. All right, thank you, Stop. Looks like Stop has decided to let the team know that his base is about to be absolutely annihilated by a couple of mammoths marching forward here. Those mammoths can shrug off all but the strongest of hits here, so certainly these fiends are not going to cut it. One actually really good solution to the mammoths is the scuttle. I can't show you on that one because it just died. Let me see if I could find a Cortex. Gunslingers, by the way, took down that commander over there. Do we have a Cortex bot lab anywhere? We do. Okay, let me show you this real quick. So the scuttle right here, 26,540 metal, and I believe it takes 2 of those in order to kill a mammoth if you self-destruct. So certainly one option is to build a couple of those if you have a bunch of mammoths that are all clumped up, and it can be an extremely efficient way of dealing with mammoths. Meanwhile, the gunslingers have now marched their way into the Mac lines here, and they will eventually be taken down, but man, they can cause some real devastation. Their healing ability can keep them in the game way longer than most units can. This tremor needs to be manually controlled here. Tremors are quite bad if they're not manually controlled because they'll keep trying to acquire targets, which takes them forever. Where what you really ideally should use is just, you should just set them to target an area. You should use them like a siege area siege weapon. Area denial weapon, that's the word I'm looking for. Bulls versus mammoths. This is an interesting matchup. Mammoths are 2,200 metal versus the bulls 950. So one-on-one, the bull definitely won't win against the mammoth, but if you group them up, they probably will do pretty good. And we can see these mammoths are actually absolutely obliterating these bulls here. Very nicely done. These mammoths are hard to get into position because they're so slow, but once you get them there, they can do a lot. They can do a lot of work, that's for sure. Yeah, I'd love to see these Starlights move forward. Honestly, I'd love to see everything move forward. I think we're lacking aggression. Now, it's easy for me to say that, by the way, just, you know, we have perfect vision in the spectator camera mode. Easy to make that judgment, but certainly when you're in this game, it's a lot harder to make that sort of call. If we take a look at the player vision here, we can basically just see that there are front lines everywhere we look. Now, this left side does look vulnerable, though. Loads and loads of tanks here. But aside from that, I feel like this left side is probably vulnerable. Some T2 units would absolutely blast through these tanks, especially artillery units. Or again, a scuttle right in the middle of this. You can imagine a scuttle detonating here. It would take out like 80% of these tanks. It would be just tremendously efficient. The sumo wall marches forward. There's tons and tons of pit bulls built right here to try and stop the sumo march. Those sumos, man, they just keep on trucking. Nuclear bomber was brought forward. It will go down to a bunch of fighters, but not before landing a nice hit on top of these sumos. The sumos will start taking down the pit bulls eventually, which is quite nice. The more of those you can take down right now, the less of them you have to deal with in the future, barring a complete resurrection, which we do have the bots for, by the way, so we could see those resurrected. We might even see all of these units resurrected, and that's a pretty scary thing as well. You contribute a massive army, only for it to be resurrected and thrown right back in your face. We're EMPing the mammoths. That's a decent option as well. Always a good idea to make a couple of EMP bombers if you're playing as an Armada air player. And it looks like we are playing as a mixed race air player, though. We do have the Cortex lab producing the Shuriken, and the Armada lab producing the EMP bombers, as well as some high wind and stealth fighters. Very, very nicely done. I do like to see that quite a bit. Quite a bit. Stealth tank out here, the Gremlin, here to show us who's boss. Meanwhile, the light gunships are still tickling away at the armor of these bulls. It does feel a little bit less imposing to see those T1 gunships out on the field, especially when we're already into the T2 stage. Those high winds will absolutely tear them apart. But definitely, you know, use whatever you can, right? Now at this point we have to look at the economies of the team, and right now we can see that we have the first advanced fusion reactor going up for Deather. We've got 3 of these regular fusion reactors, so I'd love to see at least 2 of these converted into advanced fusion reactors after this one finishes. That's going to be a huge boost in energy production, and we're basically ready to start maximum eco scaling. A little too many energy converters here. Yeah, that's a little bit too many. I would definitely recommend a couple more advanced fusion reactors before we go for that many energy converters. We have a nice little balance here. We can see three advanced fusion reactors powering a whole chain of energy converters, but these actually aren't turned on, which means you need to start making some more advanced fusion reactors. Might be what this guy is thinking of doing eventually here. Big eco scaling in the back line. Very, very important. A lot of teams will lose a game that they were actually doing really well on in the first half. They'll throw it in the end because they stagnate. Their push forces the enemy back so far that they start to stagnate on economic growth, and then eventually the game tilts out of their control and there's nothing that they can do. EMP bombers have to basically get a direct hit on these mammoths in order to do anything. Yeah, it takes a lot to paralyze them. Paralyzation is a unique stat. It's something that each unit is more or less resistant to, and mammoths are one of those units that are very difficult to paralyze. Most of the lightning units are also very difficult to paralyze, so that's going to be your Jaguars, it's going to be your lightning pop-up turrets, all that stuff. Very, very difficult to paralyze. I'm just going to turn down the sound just a smidge here. Yeah, the shurikens aren't very great either because the mammoth can actually shoot up at them and hit them. EMP bombers are probably the only decent option here. We do paralyze one of them. Once it's paralyzed, the shuriken are great for keeping it paralyzed, so that's always a decent option. Yeah, this is becoming very cost ineffective dealing with this over here. Meanwhile, tons and tons of Mausers on the front line, and we are absolutely obliterating the defenses here, but I think we need to continue pushing forward. See, it's this scenario we find ourselves in where there's enough units to be aggressive, but we don't have the scouting out in the air right now. So consider, if you're blinded in one of these games, to always be building a air lab in the back line, especially when you're on T2 and you've got a nice little economy. Building an air lab really doesn't cost as much as it feels like it costs, as much as it seems like it costs. It's not going to hamper your economy that much to put a T1 air lab out and then just get some of those blinks, some of those finches, any of those scouting craft out, and you're going to be in a really, really nice position. Mammoths eventually do get paralyzed here, and that means that they are going to go down without a fight. One of them will, anyways. A couple of them will. Will this one survive? That's a lot of EMP beams. Eventually it will get paralyzed, but the shuriken take quite a lot of damage for it. These Tiger tanks get a couple of free shots in, but definitely not enough to kill the mammoth outright. We're producing a whole lot of Mauser, and man, you know I love it, but I think we probably want to go for some Jaguars at this point. Jaguars are very, very quick. They have a huge damage output, and they're all around just one of the best Armada T2 units that you can build. They can do a tremendous amount of damage over a very short amount of time. They can shoot past and through and around each other too, so you don't have to worry about micro positioning. Like you don't have to worry about spreading them out properly and in formations and all that sort of stuff. You basically can just gather them up in a nice big clump, click on an enemy base, and before long that base will no longer be standing. T3 has finally hit the field here as catapults step out onto the battlefield. These can be just as dangerous to your own forces as they are to the enemies, though, so it's really, really difficult to use these. I like to use catapults very specifically, like use them to siege a very specific area of the map, so take them and throw them at, I don't know, say a defensive line, or use them against T3 units or something like that. You can see their range is absolutely massive, so they really can do a crazy amount of damage. But you have to make sure that you have a really good use for them. Otherwise, they can just kind of fall short. Huge EMP over here. We actually catch a lot of our own shurikens in the EMP field, which is quite funny. Big fighter clash over here as we're forced to trade out a bunch of fighters. However, the red fighter wall is a lot thinner than the blue. At least on this side of the map, so the blue will easily take care of that. There are some pink fighters out now. These are T2 fighters. These are the Nighthawk, the Cortex T2 stealth fighter. But that was a fairly beneficial trade for the blue player, I feel, as far as the airplane wars are going, the Air Force wars. Tons of T2 units out here, and those Junos are still getting massive effect. Mass effect. Name drop. Yeah, things are starting to become more difficult as T2 is ramping up here, and we can see that the eco is continuing to scale. The Mauser are becoming less and less effective as we no longer are facing those T1 units that just melt so easily underneath them. So certainly it's about time to switch into Bulls, into Jaguars, maybe into a couple of Starlights for some siege. An Ambassador or two never hurt either, just for that long range, super high damage. And you put all that together and eventually you're going to end up in a unit composition that's super, super powerful. Meanwhile, Razorbacks are out for Unicorn Cats, and that's very difficult to deal with. Starlights are probably your best option. We're flooding ticks into this area, and I don't think I like that. I'd like to see the ticks sent around basically anywhere else. We don't want to waste the ticks in this position. I mean, I guess it is giving us vision, so that's nice. But a single spy bot would do the same thing, and we don't have to waste all that metal, and we could even send those ticks elsewhere on the map to start applying some pressure. When you start spamming out T1 units just a little bit too early, what ends up happening is that you basically just deplete all of your resources, and the enemy can way too efficiently tear down all of your army. Oh, this catapult gets jumped on by a bunch of these sprinters, and that really hurts. This is not supposed to be... Oh, it actually fires at its own feet and manages to kill quite a lot of them. That is quite nice. But yeah, those catapults, you have to be careful with them, because even though it did get that nice little shot off on all those sprinters, it still went down eventually. And that's a very expensive unit. You definitely don't want to lose that one on the front line. See, almost 5,000 metal. Is that basically the cost of a Razorback? No, Razorback's a little bit cheaper actually. These two do get EMP'd on the front lines. That's quite nice. Not for long though, as they do break free. One of them breaks free anyway. The other one still has a couple of seconds. But don't forget that EMP missile too. So the ticks have managed to push forward here. We do have a we do have a mammoth making its march down this lane. We're basically using the same exact strategy that Light Pink was using over here. Surprisingly, Stop has made a magnificent comeback into this game. You can see that the T1 bot lab has been resurrected. We've got the T2 lab up and running now, and we are starting to eventually get back into this game here. Meanwhile, Deather is rebuilding in the backline, or not rebuilding, they're continuing to scale, I should say, in the backline here. We're going to try and get a Thor out on the field. We are going to continue building advanced fusion reactors, so we have the energy to pay for it, the metal to pay for it, and I think we just need build power. Yeah, we actually have the metal that we need, we have the energy that we need. Yeah, we just don't have the build power at the moment, so that's something we could definitely look into. First advanced fusion reactor for Mython starts up here, and we can see we've gone for those two advanced fusion reactors the two regular fusion reactors right into the advanced fusion reactor. That's an expensive strategy, but it is often a necessary one if you want to get these units out. Ooh, Mython specifically, if you're watching this, I'm assuming you're going to watch this. There is a setting in the settings panel. I'm not going to open it now. Maybe I should open it now. I don't know. Maybe you guys want to see it. I'll interrupt this game for a second just to show you guys. You can go into here, you can go into game, and you can go into cloak units, and this will allow you to choose what units you do and don't want cloaked. So definitely go in here and toggle those gremlins to be auto cloaked right out the factory. Otherwise, they're gonna pop out, and you're not gonna have cloaked units when you expect them to be cloaked. Just a little tip for you guys. You can tweak all those units, by the way, in there. But certainly with your stealth tanks, with your spy bots, with maybe your sharpshooters, all that stuff, you're going to want them cloaked as soon as they're out and about. These sharpshooters can be very dangerous on this front line. It's often, just enough to kill those T3 units fairly efficiently if the T3 aren't coming out in numbers. Juggernaut also pushing forward, and that is going to be really difficult to deal with. We basically need a D-gun to save the day. I need a hero. He's gotta be strong, and he's gotta be cloaked, and he's gotta D-gun the Krogoth. I need a hero. We do D-gun down the Karganets here, which is quite nice. We do have a Thor out by now, the experimental Terminator tank, in order to also help deal with some of these T3. But certainly, if we can get this Juggernaut with the D-gun, that's going to be the most efficient way of dealing with this, considering that Juggernaut is essentially untouched at the moment. Stop is definitely going to have to go deal with that, although Barbar is going to go deal with that as well. We're moving the commanders both in. I don't like that. I don't think we need both commanders in there. I think just one would do just fine. But I think it's about time we use this Thor somewhere else. For the meantime, it's just being damaged just essentially for free here as it gets rained down on by rockets and catapults and juggernauts and bears and tigers and all sorts of other stuff. Oh my. The Thor does go down, and it was essentially the only chance that this lane had against all of this T2 pushing forward here. We have gunslingers, welders, hounds, a couple more. Karganeth are pushing forward. Things are not looking great. Suddenly, Stops Commander is revealed by a couple of ticks that have pushed forward. The sprinters are now on the hunt. It's a nice D-gun. We see another one? Ooh, we don't see another one in time. Now, we do have the missiles on these Thors. That's something to remember. That's an easy way to turn the tide of this battle really, really quickly. Those EMP missiles can be absolutely devastating, but already we see a bunch of the Razorbacks pushing forward here, as well as the snipers, in order to do a little bit of damage here. The Starlights are out, and like I said before, those are an excellent option for dealing with this T2. You can see they melt off a couple percent, like 10 or 12% off of every one of those, and as soon as you have enough of them out, there's not really anything the T3 can do to push in there. T2, however, the snipers, the sharpshooters, can definitely deal with the Starlight. They're sort of a natural opposite to each other, so that's always really good to see. Another Thor was produced, and it's going to be used defensively here, but it has to turn its big slow head over ever so slowly. It is really, really difficult to convince these things to fire. That's the biggest drawback to the Thor, is it just takes forever for the thing to aim. Eventually it will, but yeah, for the time being, it definitely is it definitely is the only stalwart defense on this right-hand side. Now, Mythan is in a pretty difficult position here. Their right-hand neighbor has essentially been caved in here. If the commander is revealed in any extent, these sharpshooters are going to lock onto it and start firing. In fact, it looks like a pinpointer must have been set up, because they can already shoot at it through a radar vision. This D-gun is going to have to be perfect. We're going to have to catch the Razorback and the Juggernaut, unless things move out of the way here. Let's see if the Juggernaut will move into distance. Oh, D-gun does go down, the Juggernaut explodes, the commander goes down as well, but it was worth it to kill that Juggernaut. And now there's only Razorbacks and a few sharpshooters remaining. Should be light work to clean up. That was very, very nicely done. A lot of people fail to react to those Juggernauts. Whoa, massive friendly fire here as these tremors rain down on a bunch of these res bots. But this front line is slowly being pushed back out by the pink player here, building tons of those T2 tanks. Absolutely critical to get those up and running as much as possible. Nukes were launched, but they have been countered by anti-nukes put out on the front line. We can see a couple of these umbrellas here, keeping the front line shielded from nuclear barrage, while these Karganeth they're getting so much value in this back line here. Really, really powerful stuff. You can see that they're just whittling away at the base in the back, and there's not really anything that we can do. We don't have a way to attack from those hills or attack those hills. Gunships are the one thing that come to mind, although those Karganeth do have an anti-air attack, but the Hornet is pretty tough, and it could probably take down a couple of them if you have, enough of them in numbers. That's kind of the name of this game anyway, right? The right-hand side has basically fallen by this point. We do almost have a Titan out, but it isn't out yet. And if this base falls before the Titan is out, then that is going to be the end of the right-hand side. Now, Deather is a little bit low on the APM at the moment, and so this Karganeth will not be D-gunned immediately. It won't matter, though, as the Karganeth push into the right-hand side. And, looks like the Calamity has been built. Ooh, that is a rough one. That is hard to hold, and honestly, Mythan, there's nothing you can do about that. They just went for the Ragnarok, it went unpunished, and really the only thing you can do is scout that out, shut down the build progress, maybe nuke it or missile it down or whatever you have to do. But unfortunately, that was not the case. Mythra's front base, well, Mythra's only base, goes up in smoke here. We can see the only remaining building is a advanced fusion reactor on 2% health. Very, very dangerous, as we see this Ragnarok is absolutely tearing apart the front line. This thing should have basically a global range. Yeah, this thing can fire all the way back into the back line here, just based off of the fact that it's up on that hill, so it has a tremendous range. We went really heavy into the nukes here. That definitely doesn't help your front line, especially considering the anti-nukes were built all over the place. And there goes all of the green players' economy. Do I have any notes, any final notes before this team eventually is forced out of this game? One thing that I would say is definitely don't go for this nuke strategy right out the gate. That's really difficult to come to fruition. But if you're going to go for it, make sure you're Armada, because these nukes charge way slower as Cortex, and you're going to have a much harder time getting this strategy to work. You're definitely going to be very hard-pressed to overwhelm an anti-nuke system as a Cortex player as opposed to Armada. That being said, scouting and aggression. Aggression wins games every single time, And I think that was the one problem that this team faced, this blue team faced here. It looks like that will be it as the blue team taps in here and the red team secures victory. Thanks a ton for watching. Let me know what you thought about this game down below. Let me know if I missed anything that you want to point out. Feel free to leave a timestamp or anything like that. And also, don't forget to check out that new We Are Back video. We're back, baby, I think is what I called it. Go check that one out for some exciting new announcements. We've got a Discord server up now. We're going to be starting up an official streaming schedule. Things are looking really, really bright for the Brightworks community, and I'm happy to announce it. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video.